You wake up, same bed, same ceiling, same morning sun creeping through the blinds like it's done 1,000 times before. And something just feels off, like the world is running on a script. Physicists say particles only behave when we're watching. That buried inside the quantum realm, reality just doesn't exist until it's forced to show up. Just probability, just potential. But what if the script is code? What if we're looping through lives, civilizations rebooting like software updates, each one trying to reach some unreachable truth? Maybe time isn't a line. Maybe it's a loop. And maybe this version of you isn't the first.
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you're tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Skwarek, here with the marvelous Mr. Philipps, and I'm trying not to scream at the top of my lungs tonight. Welcoming back very special guest and friend of the show. I don't have any like adjective for you, but the Todd Feehan, the blue shirt guy. How are you doing, fellas?
Hey guys.
What's up, ladies?
Howdy.
I mean, I expected a little more enthusiasm as I try to like blow out my voice. I've got a scratchy throat because I haven't done this so long.
But you didn't.
I
so
try,
you get nothing from me.
and I'm just getting the nods. How we doing?
Hi.
What
How are
separates
you?
us from every other show on the
How
internet
you doing?
is there we go. If you could do this whole interview like that, Todd, with that voice, that would be excellent. It would really give us a defining moment here.
I imagine it would have a reaction, I'm sure.
Any reaction is a good reaction, isn't that what they say about news? So tonight we're talking about probably a blend of topics, and we were just talking off air about it a little bit. So I'll give some more context to the two of you, because I sort of just thrust this upon you both earlier, and to our audience. One of our really most popular subjects that came up was the simulation theory, which is a topic that Tim and I honestly just kind of talked about because we saw other people really enjoyed it, but really had no concept of where that was going to go.
Yeah.
Didn't expect it to do really well. And it's, I think, Tim, you were saying how many hits are on that video?
I think it was over 17,000 last time I looked at it. So it was, you guys seem to like it.
And for us, 17,000 is monumental. It's probably 17 times our average on a given episode.
Possibly more.
So
They say silence is approval, but approval is approval. You know what I mean?
Approval is approval. That's it. We're going to tie this conversation into last week's episode with Vicky Sue, where we talked about dreams and intuition, because there was a thread that we kind of tugged on in that episode that we wanted to expand a little bit more here. And, you know, I forgot exactly what I titled it. Quantum loops and cosmic reboots. Can't even speak. Quantum loops and cosmic reboots. And part of that title is the whole idea of quantum computing and quantum theory kind of ties into all of this and how it impacts the simulation. And I guess a lot of what this intuition, this dream world, this dream verse is timely, piles onto some other topics we've had here, and really piles onto what we talked about last week. So let's dive in a little bit here. Just to some groundwork and some context, I wanted to bring up the observer effect and the double slit experiment, which I'm really not going to dive into too deep. We went through that a little bit in the last episode on
we covered it on
theory.
Pretty deep on one of them. I forget which one.
Simulation.
Was it simulation? Yeah, that's right. It was simulation.
For sure, yeah.
Yep.
The gist of it is that reality only manifests itself when it's watched, right? And that was the whole gist of the experiment. It's a lot more technical, a lot more sciencey than that, but we're not going to really dive down that at this point. Todd.
Yes.
I'm hoping you're getting worked up over there.
I'm brain's just rolling. I'm like, where do we want to start? Where do we want to jump in? You know what I mean?
I want to dive in to a little bit about quantum mechanics and we can go any direction with that quantum entanglement and computing. There was a point in time where, when we first became acquainted, you started talking to me about how to refactor memory and rewrite it in such a way that you can create more space without adapting the hardware. And one of the things that I had said to you at that time was that the only plausible way to do that is with quantum computing, where you're not going linearly, you're going sort of 4D or in every direction all at once. Has that opinion changed since then? And I know very high level here, but has that opinion changed?
Yeah, and it was a long conversation. No, it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed at all. But it'll be a great time to kind of maybe oversimplify where the idea of it and how it intertwines with these multiple realities, dream states, energy, and all that stuff. So it like I said, not I want to say dumbed down, just oversimplified version. But when you think about it, you're like, that makes sense. You know what I mean? And that's why I think it's so powerful. Is it's so simple, and it makes sense that if you want to go deeper, that you could possibly see the connections, because everything we're talking about is actually a crossover of multiple things, and sometimes people don't see those associations. And I think tonight I'd like us to try to pull some of those things together and see the patterns within the nature of reality and this and that and everything else. And I think that'll be fun. So where do you want to begin?
Well, so before we started, before even you hopped on, Todd, Tim was talking to me about his new interest in string theory.
Yeah.
And as he's begun watching Young Sheldon and really getting the basis of the understanding in string theory. I do want to just at least start with the basis. Tim, I don't know how much of that previous conversation about the simulation theory that you remember. Coming out of that, do you remember whether or not you believed we were in a simulation?
No, I didn't, and I still don't think we're in a simulation.
Todd, I'm going to pose the same question to you.
Absolutely.
No background information.
I'll just jump around and quote what I've heard, that the big heads, the Tysons and everybody else, as they've said, in a mathematical computation, more than likely there are greater odds that we're in a type of simulation than that we're not. And I kind of agree with that. It's not as simple as just sure, yeah, thumbs up. But if we're going to simplify it to a yes or no answer, then absolutely it exists, and that's the nature of our reality. It's not that there's alternatives. They exist as a whole. It's not a. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
it's fascinating because it's two very stark different opinions. Tim's a hard no, and Todd verbatim is an absolutely yes.
I've never look. I know when Todd just brought it up, right? When you look at the mathematical equations, it's more likely a chance that we are than we aren't. To me, you could sit here and explain all of those equations to me, and I'll go, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So you're spouting bullshit. Not you, Todd. I'm just speaking in general. You're spouting bullshit.
I tend to do that too. So,
right? Like, to me, like, you're spouting bullshit. Like, it's not like you're fucking making things up that nobody could prove. So, no, we're not. I know that sounds very naive, but that's just currently where I stand right now. Nobody has ever explained it in a way where I can go, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I can see how that could happen. So until that day happens, no simulation, my friend.
Well, hold my beer. I want to try to challenge that tonight. If that's all right.
That's what excellent. I wanted to get you into. It's interesting because I kind of toe the line, and this isn't intentional. I promise. It's sort of happenstance that we're all in differing opinions. I understand the philosophy of it as to why we might be in a simulation. I understand the concept of the mathematics and all of that, how that's written. But on the same token, to me, it's very hard to, I guess, digest the idea that this is all, I don't even want to say planned, because simulations don't necessarily have to be planned because you're awaiting the outcome, but that this is like somebody's trigger on a video game and we're just playing it through. And so I think the truth really lies in between there. And I guess to set some definition on that is, I think the word simulation for me is what gets me the most hung up. When I think simulation, I am thinking video game. And I don't think that that's what the scientific explanation is supposed to be.
It's just the closest way they can explain it. Exactly.
Precise.
Because keep in mind, when you use the word simulation, it completely introduces the concept that you have no control of your destiny.
Correct.
And that's not true. That doesn't mean that you have no control of your destiny. It's just the best way to explain it. And so
let's pull on that a little bit then.
Okay.
How would you define this idea of living within a simulation if it is not no control of your destiny?
I'm happy to answer that question just so you understand. It's not a simple answer. It's a long-winded one. Mm-hmm. So if you want to give me a second, I'll kind of build it up. And Tim, as you know, skipping all the mathematics, yes. First off, I don't understand half of them either. And the part that tricks me up is like, why are we even talking about this? Why is an important question when you're trying to understand things? But going off the simple concept of particles, where they're saying this particle over here is connected to this particle, and this one rotates right, this one will rotate left. Are you with me so far? When they're talking about all that, and it's because everything's connected. Things, especially on something simple like that, they're working on an axis. There's a third object that they're not acknowledging, can't see, or whatever. But everything in the universe is connected. But to add to that, you got to start with the fact that, and again, we're going to really bring it down to simplify it. Everything we know in the universe, and this has been proven by science, that everything is electrical. Everything is complete pure energy. From the door that you walk into, when you look it down at the absolute atomic level, it's just particles of protons, neutrons, electrons. The same goes for your car, it goes for your cat, and it goes for yourself. At the most microbial or beyond microbial levels, you can see the atomic makeup of everything, and everything is energy, which plays into why everything's a simulation, because everything's electrical. Taking a short break. Does that make sense so far? Everything's interconnected. Everything's electrical. But in my opinion, and because there's so much energy throughout the entire universe, I think that energy, much like all of us, it passes through moments of consciousness and non-consciousness, because if everything's energy, what's the deviation between that is what's solid and that is what's not? And I think that it's just a place for everything to go. Because if we're accepting the fact that we're energy and everything around us is energy, what kind of experience or knowledge can energy hold without experience? Knowledge requires experience and everything. And so these life experiences we have help us as a energy type being. I mean, not going into all the flower power hippie stuff, even though I agree with the energy concept, I'm just not going to go on that tangent. It's just a matter of, it starts to make sense that when everything's energy, what does energy do? And the answer is, well, it accumulates, it changes things, it lives multitudes of existence. I mean, for all we know, Tim, in your previous existence a billion years ago, although all time crisscrosses and stuff, there's a state of existence where you may have just been a tree, and you're like, you know what? I'm just learning how to drink water, take a deep breath, stand strong, chill, enjoy the sun. You know what I mean? Every living being is a new experience, and I think that as we evolve as a species, and that's why everything evolves. It's kind of like, what is our limitations? But what started out as one little piece of energy has now become living cells and planes and everything else that we can manipulate. And I had a really interesting conversation with my wife earlier this week that I'd love to tell you guys sometimes. But the power of the human species, I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for. And it's like, if we just let go some of that fear and be like, you know what, fuck it. What if this guy's right? Let's take this tangent on research in this and find out more about the universe. We might find out he's actually right or close, you know what I mean? Or wrong. And then we can close the subject altogether. But because everything's electrical and we're talking about dreams and stuff like that, there's absolutely nothing that prevents you from having multiple experiences. I would say that there's fewer experiences of Tim and Shane on the world, in the world of timelines and cross and parallel dimensions and stuff, then there's fewer of those. Like life is rare. There are fewer of those than there are of not. Does that make sense? And all those similar things that create deja vu, this lifetime coming in, crisscrossing with this one, that gives that premonition or whatever. That's what's giving you those, and that also strengthens. It's literally where this concept, I believe, where the old philosophers were talking about how time is woven. It's woven through strings of commonality, like everything that's around us. Everything is repeating patterns, repeating commonalities, and when you start seeing it, it starts to just make more sense. And it's like, because things of like it work really well together, and things that are completely dissimilar tend to stay apart. And so life and energy is not complicated once you understand the simple factors of it from a physical, how does it react in the world around us. You can start seeing those same things over and over and over. So how is that for the nickel tour? Did I get too confusing there?
You weren't kidding when you said the answer was going to be a little long-winded. It was, but there was a lot of points that I think you covered in there that I want to tackle one at a time. The first of which is, Tim's always had this thing where he really doesn't like dogs too much, or most dogs, and I guess him being a tree in a previous life makes sense because they probably pissed on him all the time. So.
Or it fell on him.
I don't dislike dogs. They just don't belong in a house. They're fucking animals. Get them out. Go outside. Go outside where you belong.
I do love dogs, to all of our listeners out there, so please don't unsubscribe to the channel because of Tim's tastes.
And I don't dislike them.
Taste.
I just dislike them in my home.
Yeah.
There's a couple things I wanted to tackle before we kind of jump on a little bit. Tim, I'm going to throw this your way because we've been talking a lot about, through a series of these episodes too, about the idea of these ancient cultures and kind of more this like spiritual journey a little bit. We talked again a little bit last week on the episode with Vicky about kind of a spiritual experience you had. We'll get into the dream stuff a little bit anyway. On that vein, how much do you subscribe to the idea of like in yoga when they say like you're transferring your energy or prana or chi or life force? Is all this stuff just get out of the way, or do you buy into any of it?
Get it out, get it out, get it out, get it out, get it out.
I agree, Tim.
With it. I can't waste my time with it. It's nonsense. I
agree, Tim.
I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that are going to listen to this and that want to fucking kill me for saying that. And I listen, if it works for you, I don't mean to disrespect you. For me, none of that works. I've tried the meditation. I've tried, breathing exercises and this, that, and the other thing. And it's nothing. It's not real. It doesn't exist. I just find it all to be complete and utter horseshit. How's that for an answer?
I think there is a lot of mischievous within that realm. I mean, there was that movie, I guess, if you call it a documentary, called The Secret, that came out, I guess, what was that, the late 90s, that everyone bought into, that if you tell yourself something enough times, you believe it's going to happen. Well, I did try that with the lottery the other night. I can assure you I didn't win the $100 million jackpot. But there's also the placebo effect that's been in clinical studies where people do get healthier believing that they are doing something or taking something. So I'm partly in line with what you're saying there, Tim, is I think there's a lot of people that take advantage of gullible people that will, tell them, let me transfer this energy. You're going to feel better. And they buy into it and they just keep shoveling their money out there because they think it's doing something. But I do believe that there is something to the idea of that thinking and becoming. If you're thinking down on yourself, if you're thinking shitty yourself, if you're the type of person who's like, I always have bad luck, and you come up with these acronyms about why your life always sucks and something goes wrong, I don't know that you're creating the opportunity by thinking positive, but you're at least not creating the excuses that empower those feelings.
But you're not
is that energy?
You're not open to it. That's the problem. In my
right. Well,
from my
so
perspective.
Then that would become the question then too, and the exact same question that you had posed to Vicky last week is, are you open to those experiences that she was getting in visions? So tying that all together now, is it openness? Is it your willingness to not accept that energy in there?
Look, it very well could be, but I specifically when you mentioned like the yoga and things like that, and like I have tried many, not yoga specifically, but like meditation. I've tried meditation a lot. Even like, 10-minute brain reset types of meditation, right? And and I have tried it over and over and over. And I've tried them in different ways. And what I mean to tell you, like, I might as well have just had music on because it was the same effect. Like, it was just absolutely nothing at all in the slightest bit. So I'm not one of those people that, you know, and when I say that I've tried them, I have opened myself to it. I really did want to. And look, I wasn't looking for a profound breakthrough experience. I just wanted to fucking relax a little bit. You know what I mean? And it doesn't work. At least not for me. And so from my perspective, I've tried it out. I've had an open mind, and I still just don't. I have a tough time buying into it. It's just not for me.
There is.
I can tell. I could say that much of what Tim's saying, I agree with. I think there's more to meditation than what he's getting. Because in regards to the topic of conversation, independent experience, yes, some things do work. It's not as extravagant as they portray it. But then again, if they didn't portray it extravagant, people wouldn't buy into it and wouldn't buy crap and this and that. But I would say maybe it didn't work because your expectations were too high. For me, on meditation, keyed on meditation. No, I don't even subscribe to. I am a Palladian. I don't buy that shit. But for me, I don't do yoga because I don't like downward dog. But meditation, just kind of chilling. In an aspect, you're just trying to take yourself into a different state. And for me, if most of the time, and it does work for answers because you're setting yourself away from time to kind of say, what exactly do I fucking want? You know what I mean? Because so often that could be such a difficult question to answer. I mean, we think we know all the things that we do want, but sometimes we don't. And that I don't think that answer can truly be found sometimes without separating yourself from all the things in life that, you know, because we always have life barking in our ear and this and that, and we make decisions. A lot of times we're like, that's what I thought I want, then the expectations turn out different, and you're like, well, fuck, you know, that was a lot of energy towards something, and we become discouraged, and it's like, well, if that's not really what I wanted, then what exactly am I looking for? If that makes sense. And so I would encourage, my point is I would encourage you, Tim, to start getting rid of more of your expectations and not, and it's not like you got to tell someone, it's like, look, I'm just, if to get your quiet time, especially to do your meditation, for most of it is just going to sleep, but it's wiping your thoughts and allowing fucking just one or two things to kind of come in your head, and you just evaluate your life, your choices. What could this be? What could that be? Because it's a search for knowledge, inner knowledge, and it's through your experiences and stuff. That makes much sense. So,
I think the best advice we can give Tim right now is, I'm going to read this for you. Release your inhibitions. Feel the rain on your skin. No one else can feel it for you. Only you can let it in. No one else can speak the words on your lips. Shout out to my girl Natasha Betty.
I know exactly who you're quoting.
He's such a fucking tool.
I had to throw it in there. Well, I want to bring us back on track a little bit here, but I think there's a lot of value in what we just covered, because I think it segues really nicely into where we're going.
Yeah.
Todd, you also talked about everything's made up of electricity.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting one, because it's something I think I've really grabbed onto a lot lately. The past couple of years, by couple I'd probably be 10, I've gotten infatuated with Nikola Tesla. The idea that he was able to create energy, create electricity out of thin air and transmit it across thin air was always mind-boggling to me, right? I guess more hypothetically than in practice, because we don't know for sure.
Well, correcting what you're saying, he never created energy, he captured it, because the energy is always around us. He captured it.
Yes, that's a very, very important correction. And as you start to look into things, you learn that the human body is made of electrical currents, right? Everything you touch is made of electrical currents. And what always kind of baffled me is like, all right, well, let's say Tesla was super successful and he was creating free electric that was wireless. How is that possible? And this is just me speaking hypothetically, right? Or I guess speaking to myself right now. Can't think of the right word. But how is it possible that he was able to do that and it doesn't interfere with us? You're not getting like an electric shock through your head when that happens. And that's what opened my mind to the broader idea that, all right, well, if we are an electric world, the whole thing is current, the whole thing is energy, and all you're doing is manipulating it. Well, that fundamentally changes the way I look at everything. And so that's where the ideas of the spirituality started to maybe I don't know, enlighten me a little bit in a way is, okay, well, maybe the grander idea of the cheese and the chakras and all that stuff is probably bullshit. But if we are just grabbing electrical currents out there, right? Maybe it's not that outrageous to believe that all you're doing is adjusting that frequency somehow. Maybe it's consciously, subconsciously, however it is, and you're able to grab onto that and you're able to transmit those ideas. And then if you look at that at a bigger picture, you look at wireless technology, you look at radio technology. Like, well, how is all of this stuff happening? It's not like you're sending sound waves, you're sending frequency signals. So what are those frequency signals? So I love the idea that we're talking about everything being electric. That's where I want to kind of bring it back to.
Mm-hmm. Well,
What
I
do you
think. Go ahead.
I was going to say, what do you think can impact or can disrupt that electrical current that maybe creates these experiences or impacts the way we function on a day-to-day basis?
I think that it's more of a because everything is electrical. We got to understand that and keep in mind in association with that is magnetic barriers, or so to speak, or whatever, because you still get magnetism through electricity. But I think the electricity is disturbed. If you're talking about like we as people and stuff like that, that's disrupted because we're like a nuclear powerhouse all by itself. We're always building our own energy, maintaining our own energy, and whatever. And it could be as simple as other people around us in negative attitudes. Because keep in mind, and I know it seems like some people are like, well, it doesn't make a difference, but it's like it does make a difference. You can walk into a room knowing that something just fucking went down just by the tone of the room. You know what I mean? You feel it before before the brain even fires and starts to read the room. You can feel it, and the same thing goes whenever it's good, good spirited. I think that's why a lot of people like to go to bars and such. You know what I mean? Most of the time, people are drinking. They're letting off steam. Their inhibitions are being a little bit removed. You know what I mean? And they're free. So going to a bar, does that make sense? I mean, and it's done by the individual to the individual, and those magnetic barriers that are being created, they do assist and distort the people around us. Just in the same way a magnet will affect radio communications or something on a piece of metal. They all come into play. The question is to how much, to what extent, and if you were to try to manipulate it, how would you try to manipulate, and what would be your desired effect? But so yes, absolutely, but not necessarily as how does this ray gun affect that ray gun. We're all these little independent things, and as larger groups, yeah, we can affect and make greater changes. I mean, if you look back in the 80s when they had Farm Aid and the AIDS stuff and whatever, you know what I mean? A lot of people wanted to help. I imagine you guys were just kids at the time, but it's like it was a period when that stuff was going on. People wanted to make change, and then just hearing the songs and the music, and that's again where sound plays into it. Sound manipulation, I think, does play. It plays on our experiences, but it's a relation. It's a way of speaking a language that two people can draw the same result, but with our own independent experiences. You know, Taylor Swift's breakup song is a breakup, but your breakup that you experienced with your ex-girlfriend and mine with mine may not be identical, but we can have the same experience. Does that make sense? So it's all of those things.
It's all symmetry.
Is all symmetry, exactly. And that's what I was kind of talking about earlier. It's like when you understand what is occurring, the physical actions of what are occurring, you start to see that there's not a lot of things that occur because it's the same recipe being used over and over and over and over. Because it's like, fuck, if it works, don't redevelop the wheel, just keep going with it.
Timmy, you've been a big fan of ancient civilizations, and I probably bring this up as a reference every single time we talk about anything on these podcasts now, so it's probably well established. Ancient Mayans, ancient Egyptians, Atlantis, Lemuria, Tartaria, and pick a civilization. You're a big fan of it.
I would agree.
Do you think that they achieved some sort of energy device, limitless energy device?
I don't know if I'd say limitless, but I think they certainly had technologies that we are unaware of to date. I always kind of harken back to the ancient Egyptians. I think we've covered this probably ad nauseum. To your point, just we find a way to talk about it no matter what we're talking about. But
Yep.
I just think the feats that they accomplished were impossible without having some other kind of technology that we're not familiar with. So I believe they had the ability to harness energy in some way. What way that is, I don't know. I love. Oh my God, I'm forgetting the guy's name. He's a dude from the UK. He wrote a book.
Okay.
It is called. It has a name. The book has a name. It's about
book is
the
called
pyramids.
something.
It's about the pyramids being power plants.
Ancient power plants.
Correct. And so I love that theory. I think that's absolutely fantastic. I know we've kind of talked about Egyptian obelisks. They
Yeah.
are very similar to some of the devices that your boy Tesla built. And so could that potentially be what they were doing? So the short, or I should say long answer to your question, yeah, I do believe that they had the ability to harness energy in ways that we don't currently understand it today.
Is Christopher Dunn the author you're thinking of?
Yes, Christopher Dunn, yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic
I know.
book.
I subscribe to that theory a lot. The book is called The Giza Power Plant Technologies
Yes, that's
of
it.
Ancient Egypt, for those interested. It's on Amazon. I haven't read the book, but I've watched a lot of docuseries built around that.
Mm-hmm.
I ask that because you look at civilizations like ancient Egypt, ancient Maya, whatever, pick your ancient civilization, see how advanced they were. And then all of a sudden they just disappear off the face of the planet.
Yeah.
When we look back at the simulation theory, and this is where I tried to start to disconnect myself a little bit, and where I want this episode to differentiate from our last episode is, are you guys all familiar with the Terrarium? You all know what that is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. For those
The name's not familiar, but I'm sure the concepts are. Please explain it, because I'm sure our audience doesn't know anyway. So,
Perfect. So
Or
a terrarium would be the same thing as like an aquarium, where like you have a glass dome or a box or a container where you're harboring life within that. So if you're keeping fish, you're keeping them in aquarium, whether it's big or whether it's small. The fish don't know anything outside of that. They're born and raised in that. A terrarium's the same basic thing, but it's generally with insects. So you have insects within there. They're living their life within this dome. There's an old TV show called Under the Dome, actually. Another basic thing. Flat earthers think that we're living under a dome on Earth.
Yep.
And as funny as the flat earth theory is, I think there could be a degree of merit to that. And as I've thought about the simulation theory a lot since our first episode, because going into that, this is so ridiculous. So my whole lifespan up to that point, thinking the idea of a simulation is so ridiculous until that episode, until I saw how many people were interested in it and how many people are commenting on it. And then as the simulation goes, it keeps popping up all the time. I keep seeing it everywhere. It's being talked about more. My mindset shift. We look at those ancient civilizations that we're obsessed with, and we see that there's this weird stopping point where everything just died or they just disappeared and there's nothing about them. We've talked about all the reasons why. But what if the simulation isn't hypothetical? What if it's not within a computer system? What if the simulation is just simply another civilization treating Earth like their terrarium, their aquarium, their little pet doghouse? And then they can live lifespans much longer than us. They rise the civilization up. They watch it achieve certain amounts of technology. They see how that process goes. And then they're kind of done with that, and they hit a cataclysm, hit the reset button, and something like the Younger Dryas comes through and wipes them all out, and we start all over. Because we seem to be following the same trajectory every single time if you align those ancient civilizations to us. We start as cavemen. We start to assemble ourselves in groups. We create cities. We create farming. We do hunting. Then we start building technology. We build city centers. We praise to gods. Why is it always so cyclical across millennia? And is that planted? And why is nothing else happening around us? Why are dogs not doing that and coming back and getting their revenge on Tim? Why are monkeys not doing that, or that are very similar to us? Why are the dolphins that are supposed to be smarter than us, or octopus, which are supposed to be alien DNA? Why is nobody else? Why is no other species throughout history assembling and becoming a civilization? Why is it always humans? Floors open. That's kind of where my mind is coming from. Does that make any sense, or do I sound like I'm on crack?
No, I get what you're saying. Look,
Yeah.
I don't have an answer as to why only our
Hypothetical.
species is doing that, but I think it's much more likely that, why do we keep getting to these points and then regressing again? It's probably natural disaster. It's probably natural disaster, or they wiped each other out. That's utilizing Occam's razor. The simplest answer is usually the correct one. I think it's probably some natural disaster or some cataclysm created by those civilizations.
My side of it is, I would say that it's evolution. It's evolve or die. It's one of the most easiest, simplest, strongest forces that goes on in life. But cutting into your Terrarium concept, I don't know. I'm pretty sure we had this conversation. Remember when we talked about, for me, life's like a box within a box within a box within a box. That's what life is. So at the highest level of the Terrarium is the entire universe around us. On a smaller scale, it's the world. You know what I mean? And when you go smaller than that, we're a walking Terrarium. I mean, when you think about it, even within our body, we have gold, we have silver, we have hard metals, we have actual bacteria and all kinds of life that lives not only within our blood system, it's living on our skin, mites, this and that. You know what I mean? Like a living, walking planet, but on a smaller scale. But that's the difference when you go from one box to the larger box to the next box. And then that Terrarium concept, the life is not the same. It alters. It has to be the laws of nature require it to be in a completely different form, and it changes. And it's a higher elevated deal. And that's kind of where I believe in our last podcast, we were talking about that great reset. It's like, it is associated also to Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. It's like the hero's journey is not just talking about a child who grows up and matures into the adult, or the neophyte that turns into the hero, although the two are virtually the same. Life goes through the same cycles over hundreds and thousands of years, in addition to just over 100 years with one person. Does that make sense? It's all these re-replicating narratives that occur over and over, just like we're saying again, because again, energy keeps re-replicating shit, and at the next level, they just tweak it enough that it happens in a different form.
Well, I'm gonna build on what you just said there. You said they just tweak it enough, and so that goes back to my comment that I was getting at is we're evolving and we're following this path to build up our civilization. I believe that there are aliens out there. I believe that the idea of gods are aliens that came down and instructed us or guided us. So leaning on that, to me, it's become less of a stretch to now believe that the simulation could just be our civilization, in that they tried it this way. It didn't work. Let's just drop something down there. Let's wipe them all out. Let's clean slate. Let's start over. Let's try it again. We're going to seed humans. We're going to come down. We're going to guide them. Let's go that pathway and see where it goes. I'm not saying I totally subscribe to this. It's sort of a little devil's advocate. But if I'm stripping the word simulation out, it's easier for me to digest the fact that there is an alien overlord, your god, if you will, that is facilitating each incarnation of civilization, and that is the simulation. Whether they're doing it as a hobby, whether they're doing it as a science experiment, or whether they actually want to see life prosper, that I don't know. But that idea seems to resonate with me a lot more sanely than thinking that I'm in a computer game right now. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. Because again, we're talking about that I don't have control over my destiny if we look at it one way.
Well, if you look at it the other way, yes.
Exactly. But just as I don't know if we ever talked about this, but as a funny concept, the word God alone is a very interesting word. And I was messing with some people online one day, and I'm like, okay, go ahead and define what actually God. One thing that, and I go, but here's the cliche. Something we all agree on the planet. And they're like, well, you can't, nobody agrees what God is. I'm like, okay, so so let's draw back to its origin. When was God first used? And they're like, well, in the Bible. And it's like, only if you can predate the Bible prior to its actual first usage. In my experience, and God was used for the first time by Cyrus the Great. Because God is a title. It's not an entity, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Because of where in history I see its first usage. God, you have a king who's king of a realm. You have an emperor who's got many kingdoms. And God would be someone who has control over many empires. Does that make sense? It's more of a title.
Sure.
So that's why I have a preference to use creator or origin or something like that,
Right.
because to me, how do you explain someone who controls multiple empires? Well, you can call them many things, but and you know, because we're talking about egos here. If you're an emperor, you know what I mean. Well, I don't want to be in the same class as this emperor if I got 3 empires. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a god, you know. And but my nature of where everything comes at in regards to God, like you're talking about, God is just the ultimate being. It's the one. It's the one thing that everything is born from, all life, all everything. And I don't think that I don't think it plays a as much of a you should have done this role as the religions say, because at the end of the day, you'll fuck around and find out. But to define God, to me, the ultimate creator that harnesses everything all at once is time. I mean, if you're to associate it and give it one thing, what is God? God is time, because life nor anything else does not exist where time does not exist, and that's the ultimate being and the origin of that little box we're talking about. Everything resides within that box. It's the one.
One of the more fascinating angles that I got through simulation theory is trying to answer the question of what is deja vu, what is remote viewing, what is intuition, what is lucid dreaming, and leaning on a lot of the conversation Tim and I had with Vicky last week. We talked about a lot of those things and how you can kind of harness them and train yourself a little bit. We know there's CIA programs that were actively doing remote viewing and bringing in psychics to see if they can use psychic connections there. So that's why, you know, when we talk about the idea of these energies and these chakras and these chis, and without sounding so cheesy, I think that there is some degree of merit to that, because the only way for me to explain some of that is, of course, you've got like the idea of the glitch in the matrix. Yes. But if you're able to think about something and transfer that information through those energy waves and collect it, then it works no different than like a radio signal or a television signal, any sort of an antenna. We are known conductors, right? Like if you grab the antenna on your television, it would always get the picture in there. You know what I'm talking about? Like those old shitty TVs, you just like touch the top and it work. Or like when you had your cell phone and you just like kind of like put your hand on it, like put it up really high, and like you used to put it to your head, and all of a sudden it would send out that text message that you were trying to get on like the old fat Nokia phones. I don't know. Like again, I'm not saying I subscribe to all this stuff. As Tim looks at me like his head's ready to blow up, thinking this guy's an idiot. But it's something worth stirring for me. That like I'm softening up to this general concept that there could be something more to it. Our DNA is code, right? It's quite literally ones and zeros that make us up. And I don't know that was accidental. So the idea of this creator that you're talking about, Todd, putting us together in pieces sounds more likely to me than the idea of this like primordial soup where like all of these conditions just happened to be right, and we were this piece of bacteria that all of a sudden came and looked like, you know, like $1 million here on Cocktails and Conspiracies. Tim, you look like me. You're looking at me like I have 1,000 heads here.
No, I mean, in regards to exactly what you just said, I more assimilate with that theory, right? Like the fact that all of this is just one great happy accident. I have a tough time buying into that. I don't think I view God and our origins the same way I did as a child growing up as a Roman Catholic. You know, having said that, I do find it ironic that I still pray when I get on the Parkway that I do not get killed, and that my children are safe. But which I actually do every time I get on the Parkway. I swear to God, I've done it since I'm a kid. When I first learned how to drive, and I still do it to this day. Maybe it's just a comforting habit, but I do think that there is an overarching energy, if you will, that we talked about it with Vicky last week. There's something else. I don't know what it is. I know I'm co-hosting a podcast with you. I need to do a better job of explaining how I feel about it, but there's something else there. There has to be something else there. There are too many things that go on in this world. Coincidences, like we discussed last week with Vicky. Nobody listening to the show has any idea what the fuck I'm talking about when I say last week with Vicky. But we talked about a lot of intuitions and coincidences and things that you just can't explain. And I just believe that there is some other force, some other energy that's out there that we just generally don't understand right now. And to me, that's God.
Well, I think what you're saying doesn't exactly pull away from my personal idea on it, even though I didn't go into a lot of detail. I don't think it changes it. It's just another way of looking at it. And
So dive into that for us, Todd.
And so kind of what the way I want to explain it, hopefully explains it at the same time. You know, you're talking about men who stare at goats and remote viewing and stuff like that. It also ties with the same concept of time travel. To me, remote viewing and time travel are all similar, and we're talking about the same thing because how do you explain it? And the best way I would explain it is again, we're talking about parallel existences that exist at the same time with mild variations, because there's no reason for everything not to exist at the same time. There's no reason for it not to. And so when Tim goes remote viewing and tries to find Osama bin Laden on an island or some shit, he's not actually looking within the realm of this time. He's looking into an alternate similar timeline. That's why if you look into some of these things, it looks like an imagination, someone's imagination, or coincidental, or this or that. But like you said, nothing exists that hasn't been viewed or looked for. Does that make sense? It just doesn't exist.
There's quantum mechanics right there.
You can't. To me, it seems like, how can you create something in your mind that doesn't exist when the fact is that in many of these cases it already exists, and that explains your deviation, because you can't travel outside your timeline to do that. You can only travel outside of it into similar parallel timelines, and that's why much of what people do when they do that can be accurate just as much as sometimes things are just completely off. Just like, and how's that associate with time? You can't travel back and forth within your own timeline, in your own reality, but you can skip into parallel similar dimensions. Does it make sense? Because that's all you're doing when you're remote viewing. You're just going into another parallel dimension that has a heavy similarity to the timeline in which you're existing within.
I've got a question that I want to pose to both of you. Probably a little more philosophical than we usually get on this podcast, but this episode seems to be going that direction anyway. And this is exactly the kind of conversation I was hoping to have, because I think the idea of simulation theory is so wacky and wild and all over the place, and I don't think a lot of people want to talk about the possibility outside of the fact that it's a computer program, right? And it's those dumb questions, and the way you so finely put it before, Tim. I think that really speaks to our audience, your every lay person that's just kind of interested in the topic. But in any case, the question I wanted to pose to both of you is, what brings you more fear? The idea that we are just happenstance, we are here for just some reason because it was a happy accident, and that we are going to die and that is finite? Or the idea that we are a computer program and everything we do is controlled to a degree. You have the assumption of choice or presumption of choice. You believe that you have choice, but in fact you have parameters what you can live in. Tim.
Oh, I think it's absolutely terrifying, the thought that this is all an accident and one day everything is going to be dark. Like, I find that as I get old, not that I'm super old, I feel like I'm older than I am, but as I approach my 40s and I start to think about how quickly 40 years have gone and how much quicker 40 years from now we're going to go, and eventually it's all going to be over, I think that's absolutely terrifying. Like, there's, like, I remember being a kid and like thinking about death, and it absolutely terrifying me, and it still terrifies me to this day. So the thought that one day this is all, and it could happen right now, just go black and go dark and just be over forever. That there's no more terrifying thought on the planet. I can't think of anything that's scarier than that. I find much more solace. I would much rather this all be a simulation. Maybe our soul, Maybe that's the program in and of itself. Maybe
That's
that's
the
what the
driver.
soul is. That's the driver, right? And the physical body is, that's just the mechanism that the soul utilizes to walk around and do shit and kick dogs out of my house and whatever. I find much more solace in that.
Mr. Feehan, same question.
Uh, I believe that, like much like many things, it, being that we're talking about energy, energy does get expelled. It has to be replenished, and that replenishment occurs through death. I've never been scared of death. I've been the only thing that I've ever feared was being living with restrictions. If that means it makes sense. I'm not going to jump from this building to skydive because I don't want to hit the pavement and live like a vegetable for the next 30 years when I could have went swimming. Does it make sense? That's where my fear was drawn. But I don't fear tomorrow because in my head, and there's no way to prove it in beliefs. Time it just continues. It continues in a line, and from one life to the next, I skip back and forth, and we contribute to it to make the next experience that much more. And when we don't, we give ourselves that much less. We're a continuous living being throughout time, which associates with evolution and all these things. And I don't think there's anything to fear. Except for just quitting. I think our greatest duty is to our species, not to our individual self. Not that we can't enjoy ourselves. I just look at it as something different, and that's why I try to live every day is just do the best, just do the best you can as far as doing the right things, because in time it's all you really can do. Because part of what you're talking about that when you first started that question that triggered me was you were talking about, we talk about free will and predestined shit. And we don't know what's I don't believe in anything predestined. It's kind of like we'll see when we get there. But it's ironic that people get so caught up on free will. And so I'd like to pose a question back to you because it almost, it's my answer, but it makes sense. If you knew the outcome of every action you made, positive and negative, and literally, because if I do this, this is the one chance. Kind of like in that, the Avengers 1. This is the one shot. If you knew that you were doing this one thing is the only thing that'll make everything work, and all these other options turn into a catastrophe. Do you have free will at that point? When you know everything and you know the outcome of everything, do you have free will?
Your question's almost rhetorical in that sense, so I don't know how I would answer that, but I
it's because it's redundant. Free will is not actually that important.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's the experience, because like a child, you have to make these mistakes to gain the knowledge, and that's the whole point of the life experience. It's not about, we're not supposed to do shit to be complete horrible shitbags, but there's a fair amount of room for mistakes and learning and stuff like that. So if you cut down the tree in the forest, will this forest be fine? It'll be fine. But the guy that wants to knock down the whole forest not only loses the forest, he loses the animals that live in it, the birds, the trees, everything. You make sense? And life includes catastrophe, and we also are like the phoenix. We're reborn from those catastrophes too, as long as they're not so great.
I think there is something to be said about knowing the result, but still enjoying that journey. And I go out on the weekends, especially now, and I know I have one too many drinks. I know I'm going to feel like shit tomorrow morning, but sometimes it's just in that moment, you're like, you know what? I'm going to sacrifice tomorrow to live today. At the same token, I align a lot with the idea that the lights go out and that's it. Like everything's over, right? And that is a mortifying feeling. But I would love for nothing else is when the lights go out, all of a sudden another light turns on. And maybe that's what people view as heaven. And I take my headset off and I put it down. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to start a new game now. And I'm going to open up my new civilization. And I'm going to open up my new character in this new world, and I'm going to be that dog pissing on Tim in this new game. I like that concept as well. And so kind of bringing this full circle, I think the simulation theory can probably be summed up no different than religion, which is why you make a really good guest for this one, Todd, because you have been our chair on religious talks here. Because I think it is all perception, right? Like if you believe in reincarnation, well, wouldn't a simulation be reincarnation because you're coming back multiple times? If you believe in an afterlife, well, wouldn't this be part of that? Wouldn't a simulation effectively be that because you're living this life and then you're going out to this broader spectrum where maybe you'll get another opportunity to do it?
Well, not to mention how many cases of proven, documented cases of reincarnation, especially with today's technology, to be able to record them and this and that. There's an unbelievable mountain of occurrences that they're like, there's no way on earth. The mathematical probabilities just don't exist, how big they are, that person, that kid could tell you and know that detailed of information. I mean, It's like, you can't ignore that. You flat can't ignore that. And it's like, and again, because you can't, as science says, you cannot destroy energy. You can only change its form.
Replace it. Yeah, I think it was James Leininger, something like that was one of the big stories there. We did a great episode on reincarnation. A lot of callbacks to old episodes for each of you that aren't already liking and subscribing or visiting us at conspiracyrealist.com for all of your social follows. Mr. Phillips, brings me back to you. Does the idea of a simulation soften to you when you look at it from the lens of the afterlife or reincarnation, or if you want a multiverse? Does that become more digestible to you, or do you still think it's probably a bunch of hoopla?
Yeah, I think it's probably bullshit. It makes more sense to me. I can assimilate with it more when we look at it from that perspective than, as you said when we opened, of it just being like a video game, if you will. That makes more sense to me. I still think it likely isn't the case, though. How can I put it? Just because there might be, and you can look at it from a spiritual perspective, from just a different type of energy that we don't understand, that thing that we might call God, that could exist, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're in a simulation. You know what I mean? Like, I do subscribe to those theories, but I don't think that one and the two are necessarily the same, if you will.
George Norrie famously says on Coast to Coast AM that I believe in an afterlife, and if I'm wrong, I'll never know. And I think that's really profound way to think about it. Is it gets you through in a comfort, and he's right. If he's wrong about there being an afterlife, well, the good news is he'll never find out. So I think that's a good a place as any for us to wrap things up here. Mr. Feehan, it's always a pleasure to have you here, especially kind of on short notice. I hit you this morning with the topic.
Thank you. Can I add one more thing before we go?
Please,
if you remember.
Yeah, please do. Closing thoughts here.
Before we got on tonight, if you remember, I sent you a quote, and this is kind of it's a core belief of mine. Yes. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. And as people learn to conquer their fears, they realize that they become unchained. They're no longer living in this trap, because every time you defeat a fear, you realize that you had the power within you the entire time, and it's not life, death, this or that. It's not something you should really worry about. You should focus on the future you want to build, because who knows? If you come back in your next life, wouldn't it sound like a better idea to prep for it now? Does it make sense? And just do the best we can. And so, but more so, a person shouldn't live their entire life in fear. That all it does is restricts the adventure that life can bring you. And so, don't fear life, fear.
He is the blue shirt guy on Twitter. I think it's just at Todd Feehan, though, right? Isn't that your handle on there, or X? We are Conspiracy on X, Uncover Conspiracy on Facebook and Instagram, or you can find each and every one of those on conspiracyrealist.com. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Until next time, raise your glass to mystery. I've got a giant bottle. It's been another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. So long, everybody.